In this video, we're breaking down over 3 hours of unsolved South Park mysteries that'll completely change how you see the show. We're starting it off with Kenny's death mechanism. Kenny McCormick's death and resurrection is the biggest mystery in the entire South Park series. For over 25 years, fans have been trying to figure out how Kenny dies nearly every episode and comes back perfectly fine the next one. The mystery has lasted through over 300 episodes, multiple explanations from the show itself, and countless attempts to create a unified theory that makes sense. Kenny is one of the 4 main characters in South Park. He's the poor kid who wears an orange parka that muffles his voice. He's Stan and Kyle's friend. He comes from the poorest family in town. And in the show's first 5 seasons, Kenny died in almost every single episode. His death became the show's most famous running gag. The pattern was simple and consistent. Something would happen during the episode. Kenny would die in some horrible, violent way. Stan would say, "Oh my God, they killed Kenny." Kyle would respond, "You bastards." Then the episode would end. Next week, Kenny would be alive again with absolutely no explanation. Nobody acknowledged that he died. Nobody questioned how he came back. The show just reset like nothing happened. This happened over and over again. Kenny got crushed, exploded, electrocuted, run over, eaten, frozen, and killed in dozens of creative ways. The deaths were graphic for an animated show. Blood, gore, screaming. Kenny suffered constantly. But the catchphrase response turned his deaths into comedy. Fans started waiting for it. How will Kenny die this week? The mystery wasn't about individual deaths. The mystery was about the mechanism. How does this work? For the first 5 seasons, from 1997 to 2001, the show offered zero explanation. Kenny died and resurrected without any in-universe logic. It was just a running gag, a joke that the creators repeated because fans loved it. Matt Stone and Trey Parker, the show's creators, never addressed it within the show's story. Kenny's immortality was accepted as part of South Park's reality. Characters lived in a world where their friend kept dying and coming back, and they didn't notice or care. But then something changed. In the episode Kenny Dies, which aired on the 13th of December, 2001, during season 5, Kenny actually died for real. This wasn't a typical cartoon death. Kenny got diagnosed with a terminal muscular disease. He slowly got sicker throughout the episode. His friends visited him in the hospital. They watched him deteriorate. At the end of the episode, Kenny died in his hospital bed, surrounded by his friends. Stan and Kyle said the catchphrase one last time, but it wasn't funny anymore. It was sad. Kenny was gone, and he stayed gone. Kenny didn't appear in season 6 at all. For an entire season, from 2002 to 2003, South Park existed without Kenny. The show had killed its own running gag. They replaced Kenny with Butters, then with Tweak, trying out different fourth member dynamics. Some episodes acknowledged Kenny's absence. Most just moved on. Fans were confused. Was Kenny actually dead forever? Had the show really abandoned its most famous character? Kenny returned at the very end of season 6 in the episode Red Sleigh Down, which aired on the 11th of December, 2002. He just showed up again, alive, with no explanation. His friends were happy to see him, but nobody asked how he came back. The show went back to treating Kenny as if he'd always been there. The death gag resumed, though less frequently than before. Kenny still died sometimes, but not every episode. The pattern had changed, but the mystery remained. How does Kenny keep coming back? The show finally gave an answer in 2010. In the episode Mysterion Rises, which aired on the 3rd of November 2010 during season 14, we learned Kenny's secret. This episode was part of a 3-episode arc called the Coon and Friends trilogy. The boys had become superheroes with secret identities. Kenny's superhero persona was Mysterion. During this arc, Kenny revealed something shocking to his friends. He remembers every death. Every single time he died, he experienced it fully, then woke up the next day in his bed like nothing happened. Nobody else remembers. Not his friends, not his family, at first. Not anyone. Kenny is trapped in an endless cycle of death and resurrection, and he's completely aware of it. But the explanation goes deeper. In the episode Mysterion Rises, Kenny goes to confront his parents about why this happens to him. His parents, Stuart and Carol McCormick, revealed the truth. Years ago, before Kenny was born, they attended meetings of a Cthulhu cult. This cult worshipped the cosmic horror entity, Cthulhu. During one of these meetings, Stuart and Carol participated in some kind of ritual. The cult leader warned them that their actions would have consequences. After Kenny was born, the curse manifested. Every time Kenny dies, he's reborn. His mother literally gives birth to him again as a baby, and he rapidly grows back to his current age by morning. His parents remember that this happens. They're aware of the cycle, but they're too apathetic and poor to do anything about it. This revelation changed everything about Kenny's character. He wasn't just a kid who died a lot. He was a victim of cosmic horror. Kenny had experienced death hundreds of times. He'd been crushed, burned, torn apart, and killed in the most painful ways imaginable. And he remembered all of it. The trauma would drive most people insane. But Kenny kept going to school, kept hanging out with his friends, kept living his life, knowing that death could come at any moment and nobody would care or remember. The Coon and Friends trilogy also established that Kenny's parents remember the resurrections. Both Stuart and Carol are aware that their son dies and comes back. They've watched him die countless times. They birth him again each time it happens. But they treat it casually, almost annoyed by the inconvenience. This adds another dark layer to Kenny's situation. His parents know what he's going through and don't care enough to help him or even talk to him about it. So that's the official explanation. Kenny is cursed because his parents joined the Cthulhu cult. The curse makes him immortal through resurrection. He remembers everything. His parents remember. Nobody else does. Case closed. Mystery solved. Except there's a massive problem with this explanation. It doesn't actually work when you examine it closely. First, the timeline doesn't make sense. The Cthulhu cult explanation was revealed in 2010, during season 14. But Kenny had been dying and resurrecting since 1997. If the curse started when his parents joined the cult, that means they joined before the show began. But the show never mentioned this cult in the first 13 seasons. There were no hints, no foreshadowing, no references. The cult explanation appeared out of nowhere in season 14. This suggests the writers invented it years after establishing the death gag, creating a retroactive explanation for something that was never meant to have an explanation. Second, other characters do sometimes remember Kenny's deaths. In the episode Cartman Joins Nambla, which aired during season 4, Kenny's parents have a baby. This is before the Cthulhu explanation. Later episodes show Kenny as an only child again. If Kenny resurrects by being reborn through his mother, what happened to that other baby? The show never explains this contradiction. Third, there are episodes where Kenny's deaths are acknowledged and remembered by other characters. In the episode Cherokee Hair Tampons, which aired during season 4, Kyle gets sick and needs a kidney transplant. Kenny offers to donate his kidney to save Kyle. During the operation, Kenny dies. But this death is different. Characters reference it later. It's not forgotten like the usual deaths. This contradicts the rule that nobody except Kenny and his parents remember. Fourth, the movie The South Park, bigger, longer, and uncut, which was released in 1999, has its own Kenny death storyline. In the movie, Kenny dies after getting set on fire at a movie theater. His spirit goes to hell. He meets Satan and Saddam Hussein. Eventually, Kenny's spirit returns to Earth, and he comes back to life at the end of the movie. But this happens through completely different mechanics than the Cthulhu curse. The movie shows Kenny's soul traveling to the afterlife and back. There's no mention of rebirth or curses. This was before the Cthulhu explanation existed in the show. But how does it fit retroactively? Fifth, in the episode A Ladder to Heaven, which aired during season 6, after Kenny's permanent death, the boys find a photo of Kenny in heaven. Characters can see that Kenny made it to heaven. But if Kenny is cursed to resurrect, how did his soul reach heaven? Does he have a soul that goes to the afterlife while his body resurrects? The mechanics are unclear and contradictory. Sixth, there are episodes in later seasons, after the Cthulhu explanation, where the resurrection mechanism seems to not work or work differently. In some episodes, Kenny dies, and we don't see him come back in the same episode. We just assume he'll be alive next episode. In other episodes, Kenny doesn't die at all. The curse isn't consistent. Matt Stone and Trey Parker have given various explanations for Kenny over the years, and they don't all match. In early interviews, they said Kenny's deaths were just a gag with no explanation needed. It was cartoon logic. In later interviews, after the Cthulhu explanation aired, they said they'd always planned to explain it eventually. But this contradicts their earlier statements. In DVD commentaries, they've joked about Kenny being truly immortal, or Quantum Kenny, existing in multiple states. They don't take the lore seriously because South Park has never cared about consistent mythology. Some fans have created their own theories to explain the contradictions. One theory suggests that Kenny's resurrection isn't actually caused by the Cthulhu curse. Instead, Kenny is genuinely immortal through some other mechanism, and his parents' cult story is either a lie or a misunderstanding of what's really happening. This theory points to Kenny's ability to become Mysterian, a superhero with real powers, suggesting Kenny has always been special independent of his parents. Another theory proposes that South Park itself is cursed, or exists in a strange reality where death doesn't work normally. Kenny isn't the only character who experiences impossible things. Characters have died and come back, including Chef, Miss Chalksundick, and others. Maybe Kenny's situation is just the most extreme version of South Park's general weirdness. The town exists outside normal reality. A third theory suggests the entire show is from the boys' perspective, particularly Stan's, and Kenny's deaths and resurrections are how children process trauma. Maybe Kenny is actually dying repeatedly due to his family's poverty and dangerous living conditions, and the boys' minds reset each time because they can't cope with losing their friend over and over. This would make the show much darker and more psychological. The most practical theory is that there is no consistent explanation because Matt Stone and Trey Parker don't care about maintaining Kenny's death mythology. They killed the gag after 5 seasons because it got old. They brought Kenny back because fans missed him. They created the Cthulhu explanation because it was funny and fit that particular storyline. They ignore or contradict it in later episodes because the joke isn't as important anymore. Kenny's death mechanism is whatever the episode needs it to be. In recent seasons, Kenny rarely dies. The catchphrase appears maybe once or twice a season, usually as a nostalgic callback. The show has moved on from the gag that defined its early years. Kenny is now primarily known as Mysterian, his superhero identity, or as the poor kid, or as the character who dies sometimes. The resurrection mechanism isn't explored or referenced much anymore. What makes this mystery frustrating is that South Park actually gave us a detailed explanation. The Cthulhu cult answer is canon. It's stated clearly in a major episode arc, but it doesn't account for contradictions from earlier seasons, and later seasons don't follow it consistently. The explanation raises more questions than it answers. Why do Kenny's parents remember if the curse is supposed to make everyone forget except Kenny? How does Kenny age back to his current age overnight? What about the times characters did remember? How does the afterlife fit into this? So, what do we actually know for certain about Kenny's death mechanism? Here's what is 100% confirmed. Kenny died in almost every episode of the first 5 seasons. His friend said a catchphrase in response. Kenny was absent for all of season 6 after a real death. Kenny came back with no explanation. In season 14, the show revealed that Kenny remembers all his deaths. His parents were in a Cthulhu cult, and the cult curse causes Kenny to resurrect. Kenny's parents remember the resurrections. Nobody else does. Here's what remains a mystery. Why do some characters sometimes reference or remember Kenny's previous deaths? How did Kenny's soul go to heaven and hell if he's cursed to resurrect? How did the movie's death mechanics fit with the show's explanation? Why has the resurrection mechanism seemingly stopped working or been ignored in recent seasons? Did Matt and Trey plan this explanation from the beginning or make it up in season 14? Is the Cthulhu curse the real reason? Or is there something else going on with Kenny? The writers of South Park have made it very clear that they don't care about maintaining consistent lore. They've broken their own rules constantly across 26 seasons. They retcon things, contradict themselves, and ignore their own mythology when it's convenient. Matt Stone and Trey Parker create South Park quickly, often writing and animating episodes in less than a week. They don't have time to check every detail against previous seasons. Consistency isn't the goal. Jokes are the goal. Kenny's death mechanism represents something bigger than just a running gag. It represents South Park's entire approach to storytelling. The show creates mysteries, offers explanations, then ignores or contradicts those explanations later. Nothing is sacred. Nothing is permanent. Rules exist until they don't. Kenny dies until he doesn't. The curse explains everything until it explains nothing. Maybe that's appropriate for a character who exists in eternal limbo. Kenny is trapped in a cycle he can't escape or understand. The show is trapped in its own mythology that it can't or won't maintain. Both Kenny and South Park are stuck, repeating patterns that stopped making sense years ago but continue anyway because that's what everyone expects. The real mystery isn't how Kenny resurrects. The real mystery is why we expect a show that started with construction paper cutouts and fart jokes to have consistent cosmic horror mythology. South Park has always been about chaos over order, shock over explanation, and jokes over logic. Kenny's death mechanism is whatever Matt and Trey needed to be in that moment. Sometimes it's a Cthulhu curse. Sometimes it's just cartoon logic. Sometimes he doesn't die at all. The mystery exists because the show won't commit to its own answer. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Cartman's father identity. One of the strangest things about South Park is the mystery surrounding Eric Cartman's father. The show built an entire 2-part cliffhanger around this question in 1998, delivered a fake-out answer, revealed the real answer in the most shocking way possible, then never fully explained how the biology could actually work. Where did Cartman come from? Who is his father? These questions have defined one of TV's most infamous mysteries. Cartman lives alone with his mother, Liane Cartman. He's never had a father figure in his life. His mother spoils him, gives him whatever he wants, and enables his worst behavior. But Cartman has no dad, no man in the house, no explanation for where he came from. For the show's first season, this wasn't really addressed. Cartman just had a single mother. Plenty of kids do. Then in the season 1 finale, everything changed. The episode Cartman's Mom is a Dirty Slut aired on the 25th of February, 1998. This episode became one of the most famous season finales in television history, but not for the reasons anyone expected. In this episode, Cartman decides he wants to know who his father is. He's tired of not knowing. He wants answers. So Cartman goes to his mother and demands she tell him the truth. Leanne initially refuses, saying it's complicated. But Cartman persists. He needs to know who his father is for a school assignment. His mother finally agrees to reveal the identity. The episode sets up a mystery structure. Throughout the episode, various male characters from South Park are presented as potential fathers. Chef, Mr. Garrison, Officer Barbrady, and even some of the kids' fathers are possibilities. The show plays this like a soap opera, with dramatic music and suspicious glances. Cartman goes around town trying to figure out which man is his father based on clues and similarities. To determine the father definitively, Cartman's mother takes him to see Dr. Mephisto, the mad scientist character who performs genetic experiments. Dr. Mephisto agrees to run DNA tests to identify Cartman's father from a list of suspects. He takes samples from Cartman and from all the potential fathers in town. The tests will take time to process. Dr. Mephisto promises to reveal the results soon. The episode builds towards the revelation. All the townspeople gather at Dr. Mephisto's laboratory for the big announcement. The tension is high. Dr. Mephisto stands at a podium, ready to tell everyone who Cartman's father is. He begins to speak. The father is... and then he gets shot. Someone shoots Dr. Mephisto before he can finish the sentence. He collapses. The episode ends on a cliffhanger. Who shot Dr. Mephisto? And more importantly, who is Cartman's father? This cliffhanger was huge for South Park. The show was only in its first season, but it had already become a cultural phenomenon. Millions of viewers were left hanging. The episode aired in February 1998, and fans had to wait to see the resolution. But they had to wait a long time. The second part was scheduled to air the following week. On April 1st, 1998, Comedy Central promoted the new episode heavily. It was called Cartman's Mom is Still a Dirty Slut. This would be the episode that revealed Cartman's father and resolved the cliffhanger. Fans were excited. The wait was finally over. Or so they thought. April 1st is April Fool's Day. Instead of airing the promised South Park episode, Comedy Central aired a completely different show. They showed Terrence and Philip in Not Without My Anus, a full-length episode about the Terrence and Philip characters, doing a parody of the movie Not Without My Daughter. There was no Cartman, no resolution to the cliffhanger, no answer about the father. It was a fake-out, an April Fool's prank. Fans were furious. Comedy Central and Matt Stone and Trey Parker had deliberately trolled their audience. They built up the mystery, created a massive cliffhanger, promised the answer, then didn't deliver. Instead, they gave viewers a full episode of the show within a show that most people found annoying. The Terrence and Philip episode was intentionally crude and pointless. It was meant to frustrate viewers. And it worked. People were angry. The actual resolution episode finally aired 3 weeks later, on the 22nd of April, 1998. Cartman's Mom is Still a Dirty Slut picked up exactly where the previous episode left off. Dr. Mephisto is in the hospital after being shot. The mystery of who shot him becomes part of the plot, but the main focus remains on Cartman's father. Eventually, Dr. Mephisto recovers enough to reveal the DNA test results. He gathers everyone together again. This time, he successfully delivers the information. And the answer is shocking. According to Dr. Mephisto, Cartman's mother is his father. Leanne Cartman is a hermaphrodite. She has both male and female reproductive organs. She impregnated herself. Cartman's mom is both his mother and his father. This revelation was absurd even by South Park standards, a hermaphrodite self-impregnation. The show treated it seriously within the episode, but it was clearly meant to be shocking and controversial. The implication was that Leanne Cartman had both the eggs and the sperm, necessary to create Cartman. She was literally both of his parents. But there's an immediate problem with this explanation. Even if Leanne Cartman is a hermaphrodite, she can't actually impregnate herself. That's not how biology works. Human hermaphrodites, more accurately called intersex individuals in medical terms, don't have fully functional reproductive systems of both sexes. They can't produce both viable eggs and viable sperm simultaneously. Self-fertilization is impossible in humans. The show's explanation doesn't make biological sense. The show seemed aware of this problem because it also revealed another detail. The episode showed flashbacks of Leanne Cartman having sex with multiple men in town. Almost every male character in South Park had slept with her at some point. The show established that Leanne was extremely promiscuous. So if she had sex with all these men, one of them must have provided the sperm, right? But the DNA test said she was the father. This contradiction was never addressed in the episode. For over a decade, this was the official answer. Leanne Cartman is Cartman's father through some impossible hermaphrodite biology. The show moved on. Cartman's parentage wasn't discussed much in later episodes. Fans accepted the absurd explanation because South Park operated on cartoon logic, where impossible things happened regularly. Then, in 2010, everything changed again. The episode 201 aired on the 21st of April, 2010, during season 14. This was part of a 2-episode arc that brought back many characters and storylines from South Park's history. In this episode, the show retconned the Cartman's father revelation from season 1. According to 201, the hermaphrodite explanation was a lie. Leanne Cartman is not a hermaphrodite. She never was. The entire story was a cover-up designed to protect the identity of Cartman's real father. But why? Who would need that much protection? The answer is revealed through a conspiracy involving multiple characters. The real father is Jack Tenorman. He was a player for the Denver Broncos. He lived in South Park. And most importantly, he was the father of Scott Tenorman, a teenager who Cartman had a famous conflict with in an earlier episode. This revelation is devastating when you understand the context. In the episode Scott Tenorman Must Die, which aired on the 11th of July, 2001, during Season 5, Cartman had his most evil moment in the entire series. Scott Tenorman, an older kid, tricked Cartman and humiliated him repeatedly. Cartman became obsessed with revenge. He created an elaborate plan to get back at Scott. Cartman's plan involved Scott's parents. Cartman arranged for Scott's parents to be killed. He then harvested their bodies and cooked them into chili. He served this chili to Scott at a chili cook-off. Scott ate the chili. Then Cartman revealed what it was made of. Scott had just eaten his own parents. Cartman laughed as Scott broke down crying. It was one of the darkest moments in South Park history. But according to the retcon in 201, Jack Tenorman wasn't just Scott's father. He was also Cartman's father. This means Cartman killed his own father. He cooked his father's body into chili, and he fed his father to his half-brother Scott. Cartman committed patricide and made his half-brother eat their father's remains, all without knowing they were related. This retroactive revelation makes Scott Tenorman Must Die even darker. It transforms Cartman's most evil act into something tragic and mythological. It's almost like a Greek tragedy, where the protagonist unknowingly commits terrible acts against his own family. Except Cartman is not a tragic hero. He's a sociopathic child who murdered his father and feels no remorse because he doesn't know the truth. The retcon also explains why the hermaphrodite story existed. According to 201, multiple people in South Park knew that Jack Tenorman was Cartman's father. They created a hermaphrodite cover story to protect this information from Cartman. They didn't want Cartman to know his father's identity because, actually, the show never fully explains why this secret needed protecting. Jack Tenorman was a football player. Why was his connection to Cartman worth hiding? The show doesn't answer this. There's another problem. If everyone knew the truth and created a fake story, why did they make Leanne look like a hermaphrodite? Why not just say the father was unknown? Why not claim it was a one-night stand with a stranger who left town? Making Leanne appear to be a hermaphrodite seems like an unnecessarily complicated and humiliating cover story. The show never addresses why this specific lie was chosen. The retcon also creates continuity issues. In the original episodes, Dr. Mephisto performed actual DNA tests. He had scientific results that supposedly proved Leanne was the father. Was Dr. Mephisto lying? Was he in on the conspiracy? Did he fake the DNA results? The show doesn't explain this. We're supposed to accept that the DNA evidence was falsified, but we never learn how or why Dr. Mephisto agreed to participate in this deception. There's also the question of who else knew. The original episodes showed multiple characters reacting to the hermaphrodite revelation. Did they all know it was fake? Were they all actors in this conspiracy? How many people in South Park were involved in hiding Cartman's father's identity? The scope of the conspiracy seems impossibly large for a small town. And then there's the biological problem that still isn't solved. Even with the retcon, we know that Leanne Cartman had sex with many men in town. The original episode established this. So if Jack Tenorman is the father, he was one of many partners. How do we know he's the biological father and not one of the other men? Was there a real DNA test at some point that identified Jack specifically? The show never clarifies this. Matt Stone and Trey Parker have given interviews about this retcon. They've explained that they always felt the hermaphrodite answer was a cop-out. They wanted to create a better explanation that would tie into South Park's continuity. The Jack Tenorman revelation accomplishes this by connecting to Scott Tenorman Must Die, one of the show's most famous episodes. It makes Cartman's backstory darker and more complex. But the retcon doesn't actually fix the logical problems. It just replaces one impossible explanation with another confusing one. Instead of impossible hermaphrodite biology, we have an elaborate conspiracy that doesn't fully make sense. The mystery of Cartman's father has been answered twice, and neither answer works completely. Some fans prefer the original hermaphrodite explanation, despite its biological impossibility. It was simple and fit South Park's crude humor style. It was shocking and offensive, which is what the show does. The retcon feels like the show taking itself too seriously, trying to create dramatic continuity in a series that usually doesn't care about continuity. Other fans love the retcon because it adds depth to Cartman's character. The tragedy of Cartman killing his father without knowing creates psychological complexity. It suggests that Cartman's evil might be partially inherited or influenced by his unknown paternity. It makes Scott Tenorman must die even more significant in retrospect. What's interesting is that the show has never directly told Cartman the truth. As of the most recent seasons, Cartman still doesn't know that Jack Tenorman was his father. He still doesn't know he killed his own dad. The information was revealed to the audience, but not to Cartman himself. This means the tragedy exists only for viewers. Cartman lives in ignorance of his own patricide. This creates potential for future episodes. The show could eventually have Cartman learn the truth. How would he react? Would he care? Would it change him? Or would he feel nothing because he's too sociopathic to process the emotional weight? The revelation remains unused, hanging over the series as potential drama that may never be explored. There's also the question of why Jack Tenorman's identity mattered in the first place. He was a football player. He had another son. He lived in town. What about this situation required a massive conspiracy and cover-up? Was Jack embarrassed about having a child with Leanne? Was there social pressure to hide the relationship? Did Jack not want to pay child support? The motivations are never explained. The mystery of Cartman's father shows how South Park handles its own mythology. The show creates mysteries, provides answers, then changes those answers years later without fully reconciling the contradictions. Both explanations have problems. Both raise questions. Neither is satisfying from a logical perspective. But South Park doesn't care about satisfying logic. It cares about shock value, dark humor, and occasionally creating meaningful connections between episodes. What's the real answer? According to current South Park canon as of 2010, Jack Tenorman is Cartman's biological father. The hermaphrodite story was a cover-up, but this explanation exists on top of the original explanation without completely erasing it or making sense of all the contradictions. Both answers are canon, both are part of South Park history, and both are flawed. The mystery represents South Park's approach to continuity. The show remembers its past when it's convenient or funny, but it doesn't feel obligated to maintain consistency. Cartman's father can be a hermaphrodite in Season 1 and a dead football player in Season 14 because the show exists in flexible reality where retcons are allowed. The story serves the joke, not the other way around. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Chef's real name. Chef is one of the most iconic characters in South Park history. He appeared in 83 episodes over 9 seasons. He was the school cafeteria cook, the voice of reason, and the soul singer who gave advice through song. But for nearly a decade, this character was central to the show, and nobody ever says his complete name. We know his first name. We know his job. We know his voice, but his last name remains completely unknown. Chef was introduced in the very first episode of South Park. The pilot episode, Cartman Gets an Anal Probe, which aired on the 13th of August 1997, featured Chef as a supporting character who worked at the elementary school. From that first appearance, everyone called him Chef. Just Chef. Not Mr. Chef. Not Chef plus a surname. Just a single word. This made sense initially. He's the school chef. The kids call him by his job title. It's simple and memorable. Many people are called by their professions or nicknames rather than their legal names. Nobody questioned it in the early episodes because South Park was establishing its world and characters. There were bigger concerns than Chef's last name. The opening credits listed him the same way. Every episode credited Isaac Hayes as the voice of Chef. Not as the voice of Chef something, just Chef. The character had no other name in official materials. Episode descriptions referred to him as Chef. Marketing materials called him Chef. Action figures were labeled Chef. The character existed professionally and commercially with only one name. As the show continued, Chef became more important. He wasn't just a background character. He was the person the boys went to for advice about life, relationships, and growing up. Chef would listen to their problems, then break into song, usually something inappropriate and sexual, but ultimately helpful. He became a beloved character. Fans loved Chef. Isaac Hayes' smooth voice and the character's soul music parodies made Chef memorable and quotable. Throughout all of this, the surname issue persisted. Episodes would feature Chef prominently, but nobody ever addressed him with a full name. His parents appeared in multiple episodes. They called him by his first name, Jerome. This at least confirmed what Chef's actual first name was. But even his own parents never used a last name when talking to him or about him. The episode Chef's Mama, which aired during season 2, introduced Chef's parents. They were elderly black people with thick accents who lived in Scotland. They had their own personalities and speaking patterns. They called their son Jerome. This was significant because it gave fans Chef's real first name, Jerome. But when Chef's parents talked about their family, they never mentioned their surname. They didn't say, the Jerome family, or we somethings. The information just wasn't there. Later episodes continued this pattern. Chef would appear, play important roles, have storylines centered on him, but never have his complete name revealed. The character went through relationships, conflicts, and adventures, all without anyone ever saying his last name. It became noticeable. Some fans started wondering if this was intentional. South Park ran for 9 seasons with Chef as a regular character. That's nearly a decade of episodes, dozens of appearances, multiple storylines focusing specifically on him. And in all that time, the show never revealed his surname. This is unusual for a character who appeared in over 80 episodes. Most television shows establish full names for major characters early on. Even supporting characters usually get full names eventually. Then came Chef's departure from the show. In 2006, Isaac Hayes left South Park due to disagreements with Matt Stone and Trey Parker over the show's treatment of Scientology. Hayes was a Scientologist, and South Park had aired an episode mocking the religion. Hayes felt the show had crossed the line. He quit. This created a problem because Chef was a major character voiced by a specific person whose voice was distinctive and couldn't be easily replaced. The show addressed Hayes' departure in the episode The Return of Chef, which aired on the 22nd of March 2006 during season 10. This episode killed Chef off in a deliberately shocking way. Chef comes back to South Park brainwashed by a cult. He acts strange and inappropriate toward the children. Eventually, he falls off a bridge, gets impaled, attacked by wild animals, and dies. It was a harsh send-off that many fans felt was disrespectful to the character. But even in this death episode, Chef's full name isn't revealed. The boys mourn him. The town has a funeral. Characters give speeches. But nobody says Jerome something. They all just call him Chef. Even at his funeral, even after his death, the surname remains unknown. This was the show's last chance to canonically establish Chef's complete name, and they didn't take it. After Chef's death, he appeared in a few more episodes as a ghost or in flashbacks, but these appearances were brief and didn't add any new information about his name. Chef was gone from the show, and the mystery of his surname went with him. So where does the name McElroy come from? If you search for Chef's full name online, many sources will tell you his name is Jerome McElroy. The South Park Wiki lists him as Jerome Chef McElroy. Fan sites use this name. Even some official-looking sources cite McElroy as his surname. But there's a problem. This name doesn't appear in any episode. No character ever says McElroy. The credits never list it. No script that's been publicly released includes it. The name McElroy seems to exist only in fan documentation and wikis. So where did it originate? The most common explanation is that it appeared in early production materials or scripts that weren't used in the final aired episodes. Some fans claim to have seen it in behind-the-scenes materials or pitch documents, but nobody can point to a specific source. There's no screenshot of a script with the name. There's no interview where Matt Stone or Trey Parker confirm it. There's no official South Park publication that lists Jerome McElroy as the character's canonical full name. The name exists in fan consciousness without clear canonical basis. This is similar to other fan-created facts that become accepted as truth through repetition. Someone claims to have seen something in a script or heard it in an interview. They post it online. Other people copy that information. It spreads across wikis and fan sites. Eventually, everyone knows this fact, but nobody can trace it back to an actual source. The information becomes accepted without verification. Some fans have speculated that McElroy was Chef's intended surname during the show's development, but was never actually used in produced episodes. This would explain why the name appears in fan documentation, but not in the show itself. Writers might have created a full name for internal reference, without ever needing to say it on screen. Isaac Hayes gave many interviews during his time on South Park. He talked about voicing Chef, about the character's role in the show, about the music and the jokes. But in these interviews, Hayes referred to the character as Chef. He didn't mention a surname. When Hayes discussed his departure from South Park and his disagreements with the creators, he talked about Chef as a character, but never referenced a full name. After Hayes died in 2008, obituaries and tributes mentioned his role as Chef on South Park. These articles described the character and Hayes' contribution to the show, but they didn't resolve the surname mystery. Hayes took whatever knowledge he had about Chef's full name with him. Matt Stone and Trey Parker have been asked about many South Park mysteries in interviews and commentaries over the years. They've explained various aspects of the show's creation and history, but specific questions about Chef's surname don't appear in publicly available interviews. Either nobody has asked them directly, or they've chosen not to answer, or the question has been asked and answered, but not widely reported. The lack of a surname creates an interesting situation. Chef is one of South Park's most memorable characters. He's been featured in merchandise, video games, and promotional materials. His songs have been released as singles. The character has existed in popular culture for over 25 years, but his legal name remains partially unknown. This is especially odd when compared to other South Park characters. We know full names for most recurring characters: Stan Marsh, Kyle Broflovsky, Eric Cartman, Kenny McCormick, Randy Marsh, Sharon Marsh, Wendy Testaberger, Token Black, later Token Williams, Butters Stotch. The show establishes full names for even minor characters. But Chef, who appeared in 83 episodes, never gets this basic identification. Was it intentional? Did Matt Stone and Trey Parker deliberately keep Chef's surname a mystery? Or was it an oversight that they never corrected? The lack of official commentary makes it impossible to know for certain. South Park has created many intentional mysteries over the years, but those are usually acknowledged or played for laughs. The Chef surname situation is different. It's not treated as a mystery within the show, it's just absent. One possibility is that the creators never thought about it. They created a character called Chef, voiced him with Isaac Hayes, and used him in stories for 9 seasons, without ever needing to establish a surname. It simply wasn't relevant to any plot. The character worked perfectly well with just one name. Adding a surname wouldn't have enhanced any episode or joke, so they never bothered. This explanation fits with how South Park operates. The show doesn't create detailed backstories or world building for its own sake. Information is revealed only when it serves the story or joke. If Chef's surname never mattered to any plot, why would they establish it? The character functioned fine without it. Another possibility is that there was a surname established internally by the writers, but it never made it into dialogue because no episode required it. Writers often create more detailed character information than actually appears on screen. This helps maintain consistency and gives actors more to work with. Chef might have had a surname in writer's notes that simply never became relevant enough to mention in an episode. The comparison to real celebrities is interesting. Many famous people are known by single names: Cher, Madonna, Prince, Seal, Bono. These are stage names or adopted names that replaced or overshadowed their legal names. Most people don't know or care about their full legal names because the single name is iconic enough. Chef might function the same way. He's just Chef. That's his identity. Adding a surname wouldn't make him more complete as a character. In the context of the show's world, it makes some sense that the boys would only know him as Yanga's Chef. He's a school employee they interact with in his professional capacity. Children often don't know the full names of school staff. They know Mr. Mackey, the counselor. They know Principal Victoria. They know Chef. These might be the only names the kids ever learned. The show is primarily from the boys' perspective, so we only learn what they know. But this doesn't explain why Chef's parents don't use his surname. In episodes featuring his family, surely someone would have used the last name at some point. Family members typically refer to each other with full names in certain contexts, like introductions or formal situations. The fact that even his parents only call him Jerome suggests the writers actively avoided revealing a surname, rather than just never needing to mention it. The mystery might remain unsolved forever. South Park continues to produce new episodes, but Chef is gone. The character died in 2006. Isaac Hayes died in 2008. There's no reason for the show to address Chef's surname now. The character is part of the past. Any revelation at this point would feel like trivia rather than meaningful storytelling. What's Chef's real full name? We know Jerome is his first name. Beyond that, we're left with unverified claims that McElroy is his surname. But this can't be confirmed through any episode or official source. The most honest answer is that we simply don't know. The show never told us. Whether this was intentional mystery, creative oversight, or just irrelevant information that never needed establishing is unclear. Sometimes mysteries exist not because they're meant to intrigue us, but because nobody thought to provide the answer. Chef's surname might be one of those mysteries. It's not a conspiracy or a puzzle. It's just information that South Park never gave us, possibly because it never mattered to any story they wanted to tell. The character lived, died, and exists in cultural memory with only one confirmed name. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Timmy's full vocabulary. Timmy Birch is one of South Park's most memorable characters. He uses a wheelchair, has a cognitive disability, and according to nearly everyone, can only say his own name. Timmy. That's it, just Timmy with different inflections. But throughout the series, Timmy says other words. He has moments of clear communication. He even sings complete sentences. So can Timmy actually talk? Or is his vocabulary truly limited to his name? The show gives us contradictory answers. Timmy first appeared in the episode Timmy 2000, which aired on the 19th of April 2000 during season 4. This episode introduced Timmy as a new student at South Park Elementary. The boys meet him in class. Timmy sits in a motorized wheelchair. He has physical disabilities that affect his movement and posture. And when he tries to speak, all that comes out is variations of his own name. Timmy, Timma, Tim Tim, Timmy. These variations convey different emotions through tone and inflection. Timmy sounds excited, or angry, or confused, or happy, all while saying essentially the same word. The other characters seem to understand what he means based on context and tone. When Timmy says, Timmy, enthusiastically, the boys understand he's agreeing with them. When Timmy says, Timma, in a distressed tone, they know something's wrong. The episode Timmy 2000 established this communication pattern as Timmy's defining characteristic. The joke was that Timmy could only say his name, but the boys accepted him anyway. They included him in their activities. They treated him like a friend. His limited vocabulary became part of the group dynamic. Timmy communicated through tone, gesture, and his few repeated words, and somehow it worked. This pattern continued through subsequent episodes. Timmy appeared regularly in season 4 and beyond. In every appearance, his dialogue consisted primarily of Timmy and variations. The show played this consistently. Timmy would roll up to a scene, say, Timmy, and the other characters would respond as if he'd said something meaningful. It became predictable, but also endearing. Fans loved Timmy despite, or because of his limited speech. But there are exceptions. significant exceptions that complicate the idea that Timmy can only say his name. The most notable exception occurs in the episode Helen Keller, the musical, which aired during season 4. In this episode, the boys put on a Thanksgiving play about Helen Keller. Timmy gets cast in the play and also forms a band called Timmy and the Lords of the Underworld. The band performs at various points throughout the episode, and during these performances, Timmy sings lyrics that are not just his name. The song includes the repeated phrase, Timmy and the Lords of the Underworld, but it also contains other words. Timmy's vocals include sounds and syllables beyond Timmy. He's singing along with a band, hitting notes, following a melody, and producing sounds that don't fit the established pattern of his speech limitation. The song became popular among fans, and was even released as a single outside the show. This creates an immediate contradiction. If Timmy can only say his name in normal conversation, how can he sing a full song with varied lyrics? The episode doesn't address this discrepancy. It treats Timmy's musical performance as normal within the context of the show. No character questions how Timmy is suddenly singing different words. The audience is supposed to accept that Timmy can do this. One interpretation is that musical numbers in South Park exist outside normal continuity. The show frequently breaks into songs that don't follow real-world logic. Characters sing elaborate numbers with perfect choreography and production value, then return to normal reality when the song ends. Timmy's expanded vocabulary during musical performances might fall into this category. Songs aren't meant to be taken literally. But this explanation doesn't fully work because other characters respond to Timmy's music as if it's happening within the show's reality. The band performs at actual events. People listen and react. The music isn't a fantasy sequence. It's presented as something Timmy actually does. Another exception involves Timmy saying other names. Throughout the series, Timmy clearly says Jimmy when referring to his friend Jimmy Valmer. Jimmy is another disabled character who uses crutches and has a speech impediment. Jimmy and Timmy become friends and appear together in multiple episodes. When Timmy wants Jimmy's attention or refers to him, he says Jimmy instead of trying to communicate the name through variations of Timmy. This is significant because it proves Timmy can say words other than his own name. He specifically says another person's name clearly enough that everyone understands who he's talking about. If Timmy can say Jimmy, why can't he say other words? What makes Jimmy accessible when most other words aren't? The show never explains this distinction. Timmy says Timmy and Jimmy, but apparently can't say Kyle or Stan or help or any other common words. His vocabulary seems arbitrarily limited to these two similar sounding names. This suggests that Timmy's speech limitation isn't a complete inability to form words, but rather a selective difficulty that affects most words, but not all. There are also moments throughout the series where Timmy's communication seems more sophisticated than his limited vocabulary would suggest. In the episode Cripple Fight, which aired on the 27th of June 2001, Timmy and Jimmy have a conflict. They communicate with each other through their limited speech patterns. But the conversation has nuance and emotional complexity. They're clearly expressing specific ideas to each other, despite their disabilities. The audience understands what's being communicated, even though the actual words are limited. In the episode Crazy Cripples, which aired during season 7, Timmy and Jimmy start a club for people with disabilities. They have conversations and make plans together. Jimmy has a stutter and speech impediment, but can speak full sentences. Timmy responds with his limited vocabulary. Yet they understand each other perfectly. They're having real exchanges of ideas. The show treats Timmy as a full participant in these conversations, despite his vocabulary limitation. This raises questions about Timmy's cognitive abilities. Is Timmy intellectually disabled, or does he simply have a speech disability? The show is deliberately ambiguous about this. Timmy clearly understands what people say to him. He responds appropriately to questions and comments. He shows problem-solving skills and emotional intelligence. He participates in school activities and social situations. His comprehension seems intact, even if his speech is limited. There are multiple episodes where Timmy demonstrates that he's smarter than his communication style might suggest. He makes jokes through timing and delivery. He reacts to situations with appropriate emotions. He forms relationships and shows loyalty to his friends. Timmy isn't portrayed as cognitively impaired in most episodes. He's portrayed as someone with a severe speech limitation who is otherwise normal or even clever. The comparison to Jimmy is instructive. Jimmy has cerebral palsy and uses crutches. He also has a significant speech impediment that makes him stutter and mispronounce words. But Jimmy can speak full sentences. He can explain his thoughts in detail. His disability affects how he speaks, but not what he can say. Jimmy is clearly intelligent and articulate despite his speech challenges. Timmy's limitation is presented as more severe. While Jimmy struggles with pronunciation and fluency, Timmy seems unable to access most words at all. Yet the show suggests they have similar levels of intelligence. They're friends and equals. They understand each other. The difference is in speech production, not cognitive ability. This distinction matters for how we interpret Timmy's character. If Timmy has normal intelligence, but a severe speech disability, then his limited vocabulary is a communication barrier rather than an intellectual limitation. He might have complete thoughts and ideas that he simply can't express verbally. His Timmy utterances might be his best attempt at speech given his physical and neurological constraints. But if Timmy has cognitive disabilities in addition to speech limitations, then his communication might reflect both. His thought processes might be simpler, and his speech might reflect that simplicity. The show never clearly establishes which interpretation is correct. Different episodes seem to portray Timmy differently depending on what the story needs. When Timmy was first introduced in 2000, some viewers criticized the show for making fun of disabled people. Timmy's character seemed like it could be mocking children with disabilities. His catchphrase-like repetition of his name and his role as comic relief raised concerns about whether South Park was treating disability respectfully. Matt Stone and Trey Parker have addressed these concerns in interviews. They've explained that Timmy isn't meant to be the butt of jokes because of his disability. The humor in Timmy's scenes comes from how other characters react to him, or from situations he gets into, not from mocking his condition. The boys in the show treat Timmy as a regular friend. They don't pity him or treat him differently. He's just part of the group. The creators have also said that Timmy's character was inspired by a real person they knew. They wanted to include a character with disabilities in a way that normalized disability rather than making it a special issue. By having Timmy just exist in the show as a regular character, they hope to show disabled characters as part of normal life, rather than as objects of pity or inspiration. This intention is reflected in how the show handles Timmy after his introduction. He's not constantly the focus of disability-related storylines. He appears in episodes about other topics. He's part of the class. He participates in adventures. His disability is part of who he is, but it's not his only characteristic, or the only thing the show explores with his character. The question remains whether this portrayal is respectful or problematic. Some disability advocates have praised South Park for including Timmy and Jimmy as regular characters, who are treated like everyone else. Other critics argue that reducing a disabled character to a catchphrase is inherently disrespectful, regardless of intent. The debate about Timmy's portrayal continues among viewers and disability community members. What complicates this debate is the vocabulary mystery itself. If Timmy can say other words in some contexts, why does he mostly stick to Timmy? Is this a realistic portrayal of a specific disability, or is it a cartoon simplification for comedy? The inconsistency makes it harder to evaluate the representation because we don't fully understand what Timmy's disability actually is within the show's logic. Some fans have theorized that Timmy chooses to primarily say his name, rather than being completely unable to say other words. According to this theory, Timmy finds it easier or more efficient to communicate through tone and context using his name than to struggle with forming other words. He can produce other sounds when necessary, as demonstrated in the musical performances and his use of Jimmy, but he defaults to his name for most communication. This interpretation makes Timmy's communication a strategic choice rather than a complete limitation. It suggests he's developed his own communication system that works for him and the people around him. The people in South Park have learned to understand Timmy's variations and tones, so he doesn't need to struggle with a vocabulary he finds difficult. It's a functional adaptation. Another theory suggests that Timmy's vocabulary exists on a spectrum depending on the situation. In high stress or complex situations, Timmy defaults to his name because it's easiest. In comfortable situations, like singing with his band or talking to Jimmy, Timmy can access more words. His speech ability fluctuates based on context, emotion, and cognitive load. This would explain why he sings more in musical episodes, but sticks to Timmy in most conversations. The truth is probably simpler and less satisfying. Timmy's vocabulary is whatever the episode needs it to be. When the joke requires Timmy to only say his name, that's his limitation. When the story needs Timmy to sing or communicate more specifically, he can do that. South Park doesn't maintain strict continuity about character abilities. Timmy's speech works on cartoon logic where consistency matters less than what's funny or necessary for that particular story. This approach is consistent with how South Park handles many character traits. Randy's intelligence varies wildly between episodes. Cartman's competence changes based on plot needs. Kenny's death mechanism has multiple contradictory explanations. The show operates on flexible reality where character abilities shift to serve the story. Timmy's vocabulary is just another example of this flexibility. What can Timmy actually say? In most episodes, Timmy's vocabulary appears limited to his name with different inflections, Jimmy's name, and occasional other sounds. In musical episodes, Timmy sings more complex lyrics, suggesting either he can speak more when singing or musical numbers exist outside normal continuity. The show has never established clear rules about Timmy's speech capabilities. Different episodes portray them differently. The mystery isn't really about counting Timmy's vocabulary words. It's about understanding what Timmy's disability actually is, and whether the show portrays it consistently. The answer is that South Park doesn't portray it consistently because consistency isn't the show's priority. Timmy exists as a character who mostly says his own name, except when the story requires him to do more. The disability is a characteristic that the show plays for humor and occasionally for heart, but not one that's carefully researched or realistically depicted. That might be disappointing for viewers looking for authentic disability representation, but it's honest about what South Park is. The show has never claimed to be educational or representative. It's a crude comedy that pushes boundaries and breaks its own rules constantly. Timmy is one character among many whose traits serve the comedy rather than reflecting real-world accuracy. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the Underpants Gnomes plan. The Underpants Gnomes are some of the strangest creatures in South Park. They appeared in one episode in 1998 and became one of the show's most referenced mysteries. Their business plan is simple. Phase 1, collect underpants. Phase 2, question mark. Phase 3, profit. This three-phase plan has become a meme for failed business logic. But here's the question nobody can answer. Is there an actual Phase 2? Did the gnomes ever figure it out? And what does this absurd mystery teach us about capitalism? The Underpants Gnomes appeared in the episode Gnomes, which aired on the 16th of December, 1998, during Season 2. This was early in South Park's run when the show was still establishing its satirical voice. The episode wasn't about the gnomes primarily. It was about the boys doing a school project on corporate business practices. The gnomes were a subplot that ended up becoming the most memorable part of the episode. In Gnomes, the boys are assigned to create a presentation about current events for their class. They decide to work on a report about corporate takeovers. Specifically, they focus on how a large coffee corporation called Starbucks is trying to put a local coffee shop out of business. The boys are supposed to present arguments about whether big corporations are good or bad for small towns. Tweak is part of the boys group for this project. Tweak is the hyperactive, paranoid kid whose parents own the local coffee shop that Starbucks wants to eliminate. Tweak is constantly stressed and convinced that terrible things are about to happen. The boys work on their project at Tweak's house. During one of these work sessions, Tweak tells the boys about creatures that have been stealing his underpants. The boys don't believe Tweak at first. Tweak is paranoid about everything, so his story about tiny creatures stealing underwear sounds like another one of his delusions. But that night, while staying at Tweak's house, the boys witnessed the gnomes for themselves. Small humanoid creatures, about a foot tall, break into Tweak's room in the middle of the night. They go directly to his dresser, steal his underpants, and disappear through a hole in the wall. The boys follow the gnomes through the hole. It leads to an underground tunnel system. The boys travel through these tunnels and eventually reach the gnomes' headquarters. This is a massive underground facility filled with thousands or millions of pairs of stolen underpants. The gnomes have been collecting underpants on an industrial scale. Piles and piles of underwear fill their base. The boys confront the gnomes and demand to know why they're stealing underpants. The gnomes are surprised that anyone is questioning their operation. They've been doing this for so long that they assumed everyone understood. One gnome steps forward to explain their business model. He presents the 3-phase plan. Phase 1, collect underpants. Phase 2, question mark. Phase 3, profit. The gnome delivers this explanation with complete confidence, as if it makes perfect sense. The boys stare at the plan written on a board. They notice the obvious problem immediately. Stan asks what Phase 2 is supposed to be. The gnome responds enthusiastically that Phase 2 is the key to the whole operation. But when pressed for details, the gnome admits they haven't figured out Phase 2 yet. Kyle points out that you can't get to Phase 3 without Phase 2. You can't make profit if you don't know what you're going to do with all the underpants you've collected. The gnome remains optimistic. He insists that Phase 2 will reveal itself eventually. They just need to keep collecting underpants. Eventually, they'll figure out how to monetize their massive inventory. The collection phase is what matters right now. This conversation is played completely straight. The gnomes genuinely believe their plan makes sense. They're not being sarcastic or ironic. They've built an entire underground civilization and industrial operation based on collecting underpants without any clear idea of what to do with them, and they see nothing wrong with this approach. The boys point out the absurdity, but the gnomes don't listen. They're too committed to their plan. They've been collecting for so long that stopping now would mean admitting the whole operation was pointless. So they continue collecting underpants, storing them in their base, and waiting for Phase 2 to somehow manifest. This is the entirety of the underpants gnome's appearance in the episode. They're a minor subplot that takes up maybe 5 minutes of screen time. The episode returns to the main story about the coffee shop and corporate takeover. The gnomes are never mentioned again in the episode. They collected underpants, had no plan for what to do with them, and that was the joke. But this brief scene had massive cultural impact. The 3-phase plan became one of South Park's most quoted moments. People started using underpants gnomes as shorthand for any business plan that skips the difficult middle steps and jumps straight to expected profits. The term entered business vocabulary, economics discussions, and political commentary. The timing of the episode is significant. Gnomes aired in December 1998, right in the middle of the dot-com bubble. This was an era when internet startups were getting massive funding based on vague business plans. Companies would promise future profitability without explaining how they'd actually make money. Investors poured billions into websites and online businesses that collected users but had no revenue model. Phase 1, get users. Phase 2, Phase 3, profit. Matt Stone and Trey Parker were satirizing this exact phenomenon. The underpants gnomes represented all the startups and businesses that focused on growth and collection without any viable strategy for monetization. The joke was timely and specific. When the dot-com bubble burst in 2000-2001, the underpants gnomes metaphor became even more relevant as countless companies collapsed because they never figured out Phase 2. The term spread beyond discussions of the tech bubble. Political commentators started using it to criticize policy proposals that promised results without explaining implementation. If a politician said they'd solve a problem without detailing how, critics would reference the underpants gnomes. Phase 1, implement vague policy. Phase 2, Phase 3, problem solved. Business consultants and entrepreneurs adopted the phrase to critique flawed business models.
books about startups and business strategy reference the underpants gnomes as an example of what not to do. The three-phase plan became a teaching tool for explaining the importance of having a clear path from initial concept to profitability. The gnomes have made brief appearances in later South Park episodes, but never as major characters. They show up in the background occasionally or get quick references. In the episode A Nightmare on FaceTime, which aired during season 16, the underpants gnomes appear briefly as part of a Halloween sequence. In other episodes, characters might mention them, or we might see them stealing underpants in the background of a scene. But they've
never had another full storyline or explanation. This means the Phase 2 mystery has never been resolved. The show has had over 2 decades to reveal what Phase 2 might be, but it hasn't. The gnomes remain creatures who collect underpants without any known plan for what to do with them. The question mark stays a question mark. Some fans have speculated about what Phase 2 could be. The most obvious answer is selling the underpants. The gnomes collect them, sell them somehow, and profit from the sales. But this raises questions. Who would buy used stolen underpants? Is there a black market for underwear? How would the gnomes sell them without getting caught? This theory creates more problems than it solves. Another theory suggests the gnomes use underpants as raw materials for manufacturing something else. Maybe they break down the fabric and create new products. But the episode doesn't show any manufacturing equipment in their base, just storage for collected underpants. There's no evidence they're processing or transforming their collection. A darker theory proposes thesis that the gnomes are holding the underpants for ransom. They could threaten to expose people's stolen underwear unless they pay. But this doesn't align with the gnomes' behavior in the episode. They're not presented as malicious or criminal beyond the theft itself. They seem like well-meaning creatures following a flawed business plan. The most satisfying answer is that there is no Phase 2. That's the entire point. The gnomes don't have a plan because the satire is about businesses that don't have plans. The joke only works if Phase 2 remains undefined. If the show revealed what Phase 2 was, it would ruin the commentary. The missing step is the whole message. This interpretation is supported by how the episode uses the gnomes narratively. They exist to make a point about corporate thinking and flawed business logic. They're not meant to be a realistic species with a functional economy. They're a metaphor. Asking what Phase 2 really is misses the point that the absence of Phase 2 is the commentary. The broader satire in Gnomes extends beyond just the gnomes themselves. The episode contrasts the gnomes' failed business plan with Harbucks's aggressive corporate expansion. Harbucks has a clear plan: undercut local businesses, drive them out of business through superior resources, dominate the market, profit. Their plan works. They're successful. But the episode questions whether their success is good for the community. The local coffee shop, Tweak Brothers Coffee, has no business plan at all. They just make coffee. They serve their community. They don't think strategically about market domination or profit maximization. They're not trying to expand or compete aggressively. They're just doing their thing. And they're losing to Harbucks because they lack the resources and ruthless efficiency of a major corporation. The gnomes sit between these two approaches. They have the ambition and scale of a major corporation with their massive underground operation. But they have the lack of strategic thinking of the small local business. They're trying to be big players without understanding how big players actually work. They're accumulating resources without knowing why. The episode ultimately sides with neither approach. The boys' presentation to the class ends up supporting Harbucks because their coffee is actually better. The local shop's coffee is terrible. Tweak's parents are paranoid and not good business people. Their business deserves to fail based on product quality alone. But the episode also mocks Harbucks' corporate speak and aggressive tactics. The gnomes become the punchline for all of it. Neither corporate efficiency nor small business charm matters if you don't have a viable plan. You can collect all the underpants in the world, but without Phase 2, you have nothing. You can fight corporate takeovers, but if your product is bad, you don't deserve to succeed. The satire cuts in multiple directions. What makes the underpants gnomes memorable isn't just a funny, absurdist image of tiny creatures stealing underwear. It is a perfect encapsulation of a specific kind of business failure: the confidence without substance, the action without strategy, the assumption that effort alone leads to success. This resonates because everyone has encountered this thinking in real life. The mystery of Phase 2 works because it's not really a mystery in the traditional sense. We're not supposed to solve it. We're supposed to recognize it as the central problem. The gnomes have Phase 1 and Phase 3 because those are the easy parts. Everyone wants to collect resources and make profit. Phase 2 is the hard part, where you figure out how to turn the first thing into the second thing. Most people skip Phase 2 in their thinking because it's difficult and complicated. This is why the underpants gnomes remain relevant 25 years after the episode aired. Every generation has its own version of Phase 2 problems. The dot-com bubble, the housing bubble, cryptocurrency schemes, NFT projects, social media monetization, gig economy platforms. Each era produces businesses and ideas that promise profits without clearly explaining the middle steps. The gnomes represent this eternal pattern of human economic behavior. Is there a Phase 2? No, there never was. The gnomes don't have one because the satire requires them not to have one. Solving the mystery would eliminate the point. The underpants gnomes are a perfect example of how South Park creates meaning through its absence. What's not there matters more than what is. The empty space where Phase 2 should be contains the entire commentary about business, capitalism, and human nature's tendency to believe we can skip the hard parts. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Mr. Garrison's gender reality. Mr. Garrison has one of the most complicated gender histories in television, starting as a male teacher, becoming female, then becoming male again, with multiple identity crises along the way. How does the show actually treat these changes? Are they physically real within South Park's universe? Can characters actually change biological sex? The show's answer seems to change, depending on what's funny in that moment. Herbert Garrison was introduced in the very first episode as a male third-grade teacher at South Park Elementary. For the first 8 seasons, Mr. Garrison was a deeply repressed homosexual man who refused to acknowledge his sexuality. He had a puppet named Mr. Hat that he used to express thoughts he couldn't say himself. Later, he replaced Mr. Hat with Mr. Slave, an actual boyfriend, though Garrison still struggled with accepting his own homosexuality openly. Mr. Garrison's repressed sexuality was a running joke throughout early seasons. He would make homophobic statements while clearly being attracted to men. He dated women briefly, but the relationships always failed. He had Mr. Slave as a boyfriend, but called it a teaching assistant relationship. Garrison couldn't accept himself. This internal conflict drove much of his character development and many storylines. Then in season 9, everything changed. The episode Mr. Garrison's Fancy New Vagina aired on the 9th of March, 2005. In this episode, Mr. Garrison decides to get a sex change operation. He wants to become a woman. The episode follows Garrison through the process of gender reassignment surgery. The surgery is shown in graphic detail, typical of South Park's shock humor approach. After the surgery, Mr. Garrison becomes Mrs. Garrison. She returns to teaching as a woman. The school and town accept this change relatively quickly. Characters adjust to calling her Mrs. Garrison and using female pronouns. She dresses in women's clothing and presents as female from this point forward. For several seasons, Garrison remains female without reverting or questioning the decision. The episode Mr. Garrison's Fancy New Vagina is controversial for how it handles transgender issues. The surgery is depicted as absurd and grotesque. The episode includes a subplot where Kyle wants to become tall and black like a basketball player, and his father wants to become a dolphin. These parallel surgeries are meant to satirize the concept of changing fundamental aspects of identity through surgery. The message seems to be that you can't really change what you are. You can only surgically alter your appearance. This satirical approach upset many transgender advocates and GLAAD, the media monitoring organization for LGBTQ+ representation. They criticized the episode for conflating gender identity with species identity and racial identity. The comparison between a transgender person and someone wanting to become a dolphin was seen as deeply offensive and invalidating. It suggested that transgender identity is as absurd as trans species identity. Matt Stone and Trey Parker have defended the episode in interviews. They've said the satire wasn't aimed at transgender people specifically, but at the broader idea that surgery can solve identity issues. They claim Garrison's character is about someone constantly unhappy with themselves who keeps making dramatic changes hoping for fulfillment. The gender change is just another example of Garrison trying to fix internal problems through external changes, but the execution of this satire is problematic regardless of intent. The episode treats gender reassignment surgery as equivalent to impossible body modifications. It doesn't distinguish between legitimate medical procedures for gender dysphoria and absurdist fantasy surgeries. For many viewers, especially transgender viewers, the episode felt cruel and dismissive of real struggles with gender identity. Mrs. Garrison remained female for multiple seasons. During this time, the show treated her gender as real within the show's universe. Characters referred to her as a woman. She dated men as a heterosexual woman. She used women's bathrooms. The show didn't constantly reference her previous male identity. For the most part, Mrs. Garrison was simply female now, and the world had accepted this. There were exceptions. Some episodes made jokes about Mrs. Garrison being transgender, or referenced her past as Mr. Garrison. The character's voice remained the same deep male voice, which created an ongoing reminder of the transition, and certain storylines dealt with Mrs. Garrison's insecurities about not being a biological woman. But generally, the show treated her transition as legitimate within its reality. Then, in season 12, Garrison transitioned back. The episode Eek, a Penis aired on the 9th of April, 2008. In this episode, Mrs. Garrison discovers she's pregnant, except she can't actually be pregnant because she doesn't have a functioning uterus or ovaries. The pregnancy turns out to be a misunderstanding, but it triggers a realization for Mrs. Garrison. She wants to be male again. The episode doesn't show another surgery. Instead, Mrs. Garrison somehow grows a penis back. The mechanism is deliberately absurd. A penis literally sprouts from her body. This is obviously impossible and not meant to be realistic. The show is making fun of the entire situation. Mrs. Garrison becomes Mr. Garrison again without medical intervention. Just cartoon logic. After this episode, Garrison is male again. He returns to male pronouns and male presentation. He dates women. He goes back to being the character he was before season 9, more or less. The show treats this reversal as permanent. Garrison has remained male in all subsequent seasons. So how does South Park treat gender transition? The answer is inconsistently and primarily as comedy material. When Garrison transitioned to female, the show treated it as real within their universe, but also as absurd and satirical. Characters accepted Mrs. Garrison as female, but the show made jokes about transgender identity throughout. When Garrison transitioned back to male, the show abandoned any pretense of realism and just gave him his penis back through impossible cartoon means. This raises the question of whether gender is actually changeable in South Park's reality, or if it's just appearance. Can characters truly change biological sex in this universe? Or are they just changing presentation, while their fundamental biology stays the same? The show suggests both answers at different times. When Mrs. Garrison exists, the show treats her as biologically female in some ways. She can have relationships with straight men without it being considered gay. She uses women's facilities without issue. Characters see her as a woman socially. But she can't get pregnant, which reminds everyone that she's not biologically female in the reproductive sense. The show acknowledges limitations. When Mr. Garrison returns, he's treated as biologically male again. He has male anatomy. He functions as a man sexually and socially. But we never learn if he had another surgery or if the show is just ignoring the logistics. The transition back is handled much less seriously than the transition to female. It's just a plot point that happens without much examination. The bigger issue is what these transitions say about Garrison's character. Throughout the entire series, Garrison is someone deeply uncomfortable with himself. He hates being gay. He becomes straight. That doesn't work. He becomes female. That doesn't work either. He becomes male again. He's still not happy. Later in the series, Garrison becomes President of the United States, and even that doesn't fulfill him. Garrison's journey is about someone who keeps changing external circumstances, hoping to fix internal dissatisfaction. This character arc could be read as insulting to transgender people. It suggests that gender transition is just another failed attempt at happiness, rather than a legitimate need for some people. Real transgender individuals often describe transition as necessary for survival and mental health, not as a whim or phase. Garrison's casual approach to gender change and his eventual reversal could imply that transition is frivolous or reversible in ways that don't match reality. However, defenders of the show argue that Garrison is specifically characterized as confused and unstable. His gender journey isn't meant to represent all transgender experiences. He's a specific character with specific issues. His transition failing doesn't comment on all transitions failing. It comments on Garrison's inability to find happiness regardless of what he changes about himself. The show's treatment of gender issues has been inconsistent across its 26 seasons. Some episodes mock transgender people cruelly. Other episodes show more understanding. The Garrison storyline itself shifts in tone depending on who's writing and what point they're making. South Park doesn't have a unified message about gender identity because it doesn't try to have unified messages about anything. After returning to male, Garrison eventually becomes President Garrison in later seasons. This was South Park's satirical response to Donald Trump's presidency. Garrison as president is crude, offensive, and incompetent, clearly meant to represent Trump. The show uses Garrison's established character traits of narcissism and ignorance to satirize Trump's leadership style. His previous gender history is mostly ignored during the presidency storyline. What is Mr. Garrison's actual gender? Within South Park's universe, Garrison is currently male, having been female for several seasons in the middle. The show treats the changes as physically real. Characters acknowledge and accept them. But the mechanisms are impossible and satirical. Garrison can become female through surgery and become male again through magic cartoon biology. Neither transition follows real-world medical processes accurately. The mystery isn't really about Garrison's gender. It's about whether the show treats transgender identity seriously or as a joke. The answer is that South Park mostly treats it as a joke, with occasional moments of trying to be more thoughtful. The show's creators have never claimed to be sensitive or educational about LGBTQ+ issues. They've said they satirize everything equally and don't care about offending people. Whether that's a defense or an admission depends on your perspective. For transgender viewers and advocates, the Garrison storyline is often cited as an example of harmful representation. It reduces transition to comedy material without acknowledging real experiences or struggles. For defenders of South Park's approach, the storyline is satire that shouldn't be taken as commentary on real transgender people. These interpretations remain in conflict, much like everything else about Mr. Garrison's perpetually conflicted character. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the real location of South Park. South Park is supposedly a real town in Colorado. The show is named after it. The characters live there. The title card shows South Park, Colorado, every episode. But the geographic evidence in the show contradicts itself constantly. Mountains appear and disappear. The distance to Denver changes. The climate doesn't match real Colorado. So where exactly is South Park? Is it based on a real place? The answer is more complicated than you'd think. There is actually a South Park in Colorado. It's not a town, but a region. South Park is a high-altitude grassland basin located in central Colorado, roughly in Park County. The basin sits at about 10,000 feet elevation, surrounded by mountain ranges. It's one of several large parks in Colorado, which in geographic terms means high mountain valleys or basins. North Park, Middle Park, and South Park are all real geographic features in the state. The real South Park Basin is approximately 1,000 square miles of open grassland, with scattered ranches and very small communities. It's beautiful, isolated, and sparsely populated. The area is known for ranching, fishing, and outdoor recreation. Highway 285 runs through South Park, connecting towns like Fairplay, Hartselle, and Jefferson. These are tiny communities, not the kind of place that would have an elementary school with multiple grades and all the infrastructure shown in the cartoon. Matt Stone and Trey Parker, South Park's creators, are both from Colorado. Trey Parker grew up in Conifer, a small mountain town southwest of Denver. Matt Stone is from the Denver area. Both creators have deep connections to Colorado and have said they wanted to set their show in the state they knew. The Colorado setting isn't arbitrary. It's based on their own experiences growing up in small Colorado towns. The town most often cited as the inspiration for cartoon South Park is Fairplay, Colorado. Fairplay is the county seat of Park County and sits right in the middle of the South Park Basin. The town has a population of around 700 people. It's tiny, isolated, and surrounded by mountains. Fairplay has the right geography and feel to be the basis for the show's setting. Many fans have visited Fairplay looking for South Park landmarks, though the real town doesn't match the cartoon version closely. In early seasons, South Park the show used Colorado references consistently. Characters would talk about going to Denver for various reasons. They'd mention other Colorado towns. The state's geography and culture were part of the show's identity. This grounded the cartoon in a specific place and gave it regional flavor that distinguished it from other animated comedies. But, as the show continued, the geographic consistency fell apart. The distance from South Park to Denver changes dramatically between episodes. In some episodes, Denver is portrayed as close enough for a quick drive. Characters go there casually for shopping or events. The travel seems to take maybe an hour, which would be reasonable if South Park is based on Fairplay, which is roughly 80 miles from Denver. In other episodes, Denver might as well be on another planet. The trip is treated as a major journey requiring significant planning. Characters act like going to Denver is rare and difficult. The distance seems much greater than it should be. Sometimes, Denver is referenced as if it's hundreds of miles away, rather than a reasonable drive. There's an episode where the boys visit Casa Bonita, a real Mexican restaurant in Denver, famous for its elaborate interior. Casa Bonita is an actual place that exists in Lakewood, a Denver suburb. The episode treats it as a special destination that requires real effort to reach. In reality, if South Park is based on Fairplay, Casa Bonita would be about a 90-minute drive. Not close, but not exotic either. The climate in the show doesn't match real South Park Basin climate. The cartoon shows seasons changing, but the patterns don't match high-altitude Colorado. Real South Park sits at 10,000 feet elevation. The weather is harsh. Winters are long and brutal with heavy snow. Summers are short and cool. The growing season is extremely limited. It's not a place where you'd see lush green grass most of the year. Cartoon South Park has wrong seasons and wrong weather patterns for its supposed location. There are episodes set in autumn with colorful fall leaves, but high-altitude Colorado doesn't have the kind of deciduous forests that create dramatic fall colors. There are episodes with hot summer weather where kids play outside in t-shirts, but real South Park Basin summers are cool and you typically need a jacket even in July. Snow appears inconsistently in the cartoon. Some winter episodes have deep snow and cold weather, which matches Colorado, but other episodes set in the same season have little or no snow. The show doesn't maintain seasonal continuity because episodes are produced quickly and aired out of order. The weather is whatever the episode needs it to be at that moment. Geographic features around the town change between episodes. Mountains are visible in the background of some scenes, but absent in others. The town sometimes appears in a valley, sometimes on relatively flat ground, sometimes with peaks looming nearby. The visual geography shifts to fit the frame composition rather than maintaining consistent topography. There are episodes where South Park has a beach, an actual sandy beach with ocean or lake. This is completely impossible for the real South Park Basin, which is landlocked high-altitude grassland surrounded by mountains. The nearest significant body of water would be reservoirs or mountain lakes, none of which have beaches like what's shown in the cartoon. The show just creates a beach when the story needs a beach. Desert episodes present similar problems. Cartoon South Park sometimes appears near desert landscapes with cacti and red rocks. Real South Park Basin is grassland at high elevation. It's not desert. The nearest desert areas would be hours away in western Colorado or Utah. The show's South Park can somehow be near desert, mountains, and beach depending on what's convenient for that episode's plot. The town's infrastructure doesn't match a community in the South Park Basin. Cartoon South Park has an elementary school with hundreds of students, a thriving downtown with multiple businesses, a hospital, a police station, and various other facilities. Real towns in the South Park Basin are much smaller. Fairplay has one small school that combines multiple grades. Services are limited. Much of the infrastructure shown in the cartoon wouldn't exist in a real town that size in that location. There are references to other Colorado locations that don't fit the geography. The show mentions Aspen, which is a real Colorado ski town, but Aspen is on the other side of the Continental Divide from the South Park Basin. It's not a neighboring town. Similarly, references to other Colorado locations often ignore actual distances and geographic relationships. The show treats Colorado as if all its various regions are right next to each other. Middle Park is mentioned in some episodes. Middle Park is a real geographic basin north of South Park. The show treats it as a nearby rival community, which makes geographic sense. But the relationship between the towns doesn't match real geography closely. Middle Park is a basin like South Park, not a single town, so the rivalry doesn't quite work with the real geography. Stan's house has a visible address in some episodes. The address is given as 29 Avenue de los Mexicanos. This is not a real address format for Colorado towns. Colorado addresses don't typically use Spanish-style street names like Avenue de los Mexicanos, especially not in small mountain towns. The address is made up and doesn't follow local naming conventions. The town's elevation is never explicitly stated in the show, but visual evidence suggests it's much lower than the real South Park Basin's 10,000-foot elevation. Characters don't show signs of altitude sickness when visitors arrive. The vegetation shown in the background suggests lower elevation. The climate implies lower elevation. If Cartoon South Park were really at 10,000 feet, many aspects of the show would need to be different. Some episodes feature storylines that require specific geographic features. When the show needs mountains, there are mountains. When it needs flat open space, the mountains disappear. When it needs a specific type of environment, that environment appears. The geography is flexible and serves the story rather than maintaining consistency with real Colorado or with previous episodes. Matt Stone and Trey Parker have addressed the location question in interviews over the years. They've confirmed that South Park is inspired by the real South Park Basin and towns like Fairplay. They've talked about growing up in Colorado and wanting to capture the feel of small Colorado communities. But they've also made clear that they never intended geographic accuracy. In DVD commentaries and interviews, the creators have said they use Colorado as an aesthetic and cultural touchstone, but don't worry about matching real geography. They want the show to feel like Colorado without being bound by actual Colorado geography. This gives them creative freedom to have whatever setting each episode needs while maintaining the overall Colorado mountain town atmosphere. The show's animation style contributes to the geographic flexibility. South Park uses simple, flat animation with minimal background detail. This makes it easy to change locations and environments without viewers noticing inconsistencies. A more detailed animation style would make geographic contradictions more obvious. The simple style allows the geography to shift without breaking the show's visual language. Fans have attempted to map Cartoon South Park and reconcile it with real Colorado geography. These attempts always run into contradictions because the show doesn't maintain spatial consistency. You can't create an accurate map of Cartoon South Park's relationship to Denver, Aspen, and other locations because the distances and directions change between episodes. The town exists in flexible space rather than fixed geography. Some fans argue that Cartoon South Park should be understood as a fictionalized version of the South Park Basin that doesn't directly correspond to any real location. This interpretation accepts that the show borrows elements from real Colorado, but creates its own geography that doesn't need to match reality. Under this view, asking where exactly South Park is located misses the point. It's wherever the creators need it to be for that story. This flexible geography is common in long-running television shows. The Simpsons' Springfield has famously contradictory geography. Springfield is simultaneously near an ocean, mountains, desert, and various other features that couldn't all be close to one real town. South Park follows the same pattern. Geography serves story needs rather than maintaining realistic consistency. What's interesting is that the show sometimes acknowledges its own geographic impossibilities. There are occasional jokes or references that suggest the creators know they're playing with geography inconsistently. These moments of self-awareness don't fix the contradictions, but they show that the inconsistency is deliberate rather than accidental. The Colorado setting still matters to South Park's identity even without geographic accuracy. The mountain town atmosphere, the small community dynamics, the references to Colorado culture and politics, all of these give the show a distinct flavor. South Park feels like it's set in Colorado even when the specific geography doesn't work. The setting provides cultural context rather than literal location. Real South Park Basin residents have mixed feelings about the show. Some embrace it as bringing attention to their region. Others feel the show doesn't represent real Colorado mountain life accurately. The cartoon's version of small-town Colorado culture exaggerates certain stereotypes while ignoring other aspects of real mountain community life. It's a satirical, heightened version rather than documentary accuracy. Fairplay itself has capitalized on the South Park connection to some degree. The town acknowledges its role as inspiration for the show. Tourists visit looking for South Park references, but Fairplay is not trying to recreate the cartoon town. It's a real small Colorado community that happens to share geographic space with a famous cartoon setting. Where is South Park? It's based on the real South Park Basin in central Colorado, particularly inspired by Fairplay. But the show's South Park is a fictional composite that doesn't match real geography. Distances change for narrative. Convenience. Climate changes for seasonal stories. The town has whatever features each episode requires. Matt and Trey grew up in Colorado and used their home state as aesthetic inspiration, but they never intended strict geographic accuracy. The show operates on cartoon geography where locations and distances are whatever they need to be for the story. This isn't a flaw or a mistake, it's a feature of how South Park operates. The creators prioritize comedy and satire over maintaining a consistent fictional world. If an episode needs South Park to be close to Denver, it's close. If another episode needs it to be isolated and remote, it's remote. The geography is a tool for storytelling rather than a fixed element to maintain. This approach is consistent with everything else about South Park. The show breaks its own rules constantly. Characters die and come back. Events from one episode are ignored in the next. Continuity is flexible. Geography is just one more element that shifts to serve the comedy, rather than constraining it. South Park is wherever it's funniest for it to be in that moment. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to how Stan's family affords everything. Stan Marsh lives in a 2-story house with his parents, sister, and sometimes grandfather. His family goes on vacations, buys new things, and seems financially stable. Yet his father Randy has had approximately 20 different jobs throughout the series, most of which he gets fired from. His mother Sharon is a receptionist at a veterinary clinic. So how does the Marsh family actually afford their lifestyle? The numbers don't add up, and the show has never explained it. Randy Marsh started the series as a geologist. This was his original profession, mentioned in early episodes. Geologists can make decent money, especially in Colorado where there's mining, oil and gas, and environmental work. A geologist's salary could reasonably support a family of 4 in a small town. If Randy had stayed a geologist throughout the series, there would be no financial mystery. But Randy didn't stay a geologist. Over 26 seasons, Randy has worked dozens of different jobs. He's been a mall security guard, a Blockbuster video store employee, a hemp farmer, a marijuana dispensary owner, a scientist at various labs, a pop star, and countless other occupations. Some of these jobs last multiple episodes or even full seasons. Others are one-episode gigs that never get mentioned again. Randy gets fired constantly. He loses jobs due to incompetence, inappropriate behavior, or because the business fails. In some episodes, he quits in dramatic fashion. In others, he's explicitly shown being terminated. Randy cycles through employment at a rate that would make most people destitute. Yet the Marsh family home remains stable. They never face foreclosure or financial crisis, despite Randy's employment chaos. Sharon Marsh works as a receptionist at Tom's Rhinoplasty, a plastic surgery clinic, in early seasons. Later, she's shown working at a veterinary clinic as a receptionist. Receptionist positions, especially in small town clinics, typically pay modest wages. Sharon's income alone couldn't support a family of 4 in a 2-story house with all the lifestyle expenses the Marshes demonstrate. The Marsh family house is substantial. It's a 2-story home with multiple bedrooms, a garage, a full kitchen, living room, dining area, and basement. Stan has his own room. Shelley, his sister, has her own room. The parents have their own room. Randy's father, Grandpa Marvin, sometimes lives with them, requiring additional space. The house is well maintained and furnished. In real estate terms, this is not a starter home. This is a significant property that requires substantial income to afford. Property values in small Colorado towns vary widely, but a house like the Marshes would cost several $100,000 at minimum, probably more given mountain property premiums. The mortgage or property taxes alone would require consistent income, well above what Sharon's receptionist job would provide. Randy's unstable employment history would make it nearly impossible to maintain this property financially. The family goes on multiple vacations throughout the series. They travel to Nebraska to visit Sharon's family. They go to California. They visit Wyoming. They attend events in Denver regularly. They take the boys camping and skiing. Each of these trips costs money for gas, food, lodging, and activities. A family struggling financially couldn't afford this frequency of travel. Stan has access to consumer goods consistently. He has video game consoles and games. He gets new bikes. He has sports equipment for baseball and other activities. He has winter gear for skiing. He has adequate clothing and school supplies. The show portrays Stan as middle class with access to typical childhood consumer products. This level of consumption requires reliable family income. The Marsh family eats out at restaurants. They buy groceries without apparent budget constraints. They own and maintain a car. They pay for utilities, internet, cable TV, and other monthly expenses. They handle medical bills when someone gets sick or injured. All of these costs add up to thousands of dollars monthly. Sharon's receptionist salary that might cover some of this, but not all of it, especially not consistently. Compare the Marsh family to the McCormick family. Kenny's family is explicitly poor. They live in a dilapidated house. They struggle to buy food. Kenny wears the same orange parka constantly because his family can't afford new clothes. The show makes Kenny's poverty a consistent character element. His parents are unemployed alcoholics. The economic difference between Kenny's family and Stan's family is stark and intentional. The Cartman family presents an interesting contrast. Cartman lives alone with his mother Leanne. Leanne's job is occasionally referenced, usually implying she earns money through sex work. Yet the Cartmans live comfortably. Cartman gets whatever he wants. His mother spoils him with consumer goods and food. Their house is nice. They appear middle class despite Leanne being a single mother with questionable income sources. The show doesn't explain Cartman's family economics clearly either. Randy's Tegrity Farm storyline potentially explains the Marsh family finances for recent seasons. Starting in season 22, Randy buys a marijuana farm and starts growing and selling cannabis. Colorado legalized recreational marijuana, and Randy jumps into the industry. Tegrity Farms becomes a major storyline that continues for multiple seasons. Marijuana cultivation and sales can be extremely profitable. If Tegrity Farms is successful, it would provide substantial income. But Tegrity Farms doesn't explain the previous 21 seasons. For over 2 decades of showtime, the Marsh family maintained their lifestyle despite Randy's employment chaos. They were financially stable before marijuana farming. The farm might explain their current finances, but it doesn't address the historical mystery of how they afforded everything from 1997 to 2018. There's also the question of how Randy afforded to buy a marijuana farm in the first place. Farms, even small ones, cost significant money to purchase. Land in Colorado, especially farmland, is expensive. Growing equipment, licensing fees, business startup costs, all of this requires capital. Where did Randy get the money to start Tegrity Farms? The show doesn't explain. He just suddenly has a farm. One possibility is that the Marsh family inherited money or property. Sharon's family or Randy's family might have wealth that helps support them. Grandpa Marvin lives with them sometimes, and he's elderly. Perhaps there's family money from previous generations. The show occasionally references extended family, but never clarifies whether financial support flows between generations. Another possibility is that Sharon earns more than a receptionist typically would. Maybe the veterinary clinic pays well. Maybe she has skills or responsibilities beyond basic receptionist duties. Maybe she works full-time with benefits, and the income is actually sufficient to be the family's primary support. Randy's various jobs might provide supplemental income, even if they're unstable. A darker possibility is that the Marsh family carries significant debt. They might afford their lifestyle through credit cards, loans, and mortgages that accumulate debt over time. The show never addresses family finances explicitly, so we don't know if they're actually in good financial shape or drowning in debt while maintaining appearances. Many American families live beyond their means through debt. The Marshes might be doing the same. The most realistic explanation is that South Park doesn't care about economic realism. The show operates on cartoon economics, where characters have money when the plot needs them to have money and struggle financially. When that's funnier. Randy can lose job after job without financial consequences, because maintaining realistic economic continuity would constrain storytelling. The show prioritizes comedy over depicting realistic financial struggles. This is consistent with how South Park handles most practical details. Characters don't age despite years passing. The town's population and layout change between episodes. Technology levels jump around. Time itself is inconsistent. The show exists in a flexible reality where realistic constraints don't apply. Finance is just another element that works on comedy logic rather than real-world logic. Many sitcoms and cartoons have this same issue. The Simpsons' Homer has been fired and rehired from the nuclear plant countless times. His family maintains their lifestyle despite his incompetence and frequent unemployment. Family Guy's Peter Griffin loses jobs constantly, but the Griffins remain middle class. Cartoon families generally don't face realistic financial consequences for employment instability, because it would make the shows depressing. What's interesting is that South Park occasionally does address financial stress for comedy. Episodes where Randy makes terrible business decisions sometimes show financial consequences. When Randy spent all the family money on some scheme, there's an episode about the fallout. But these consequences never last. By the next episode, everything is back to normal financially. The reset button gets pressed. The show's quick production schedule contributes to this inconsistency. South Park episodes are famously produced in less than a week, allowing the show to respond to current events quickly. This rapid production doesn't allow time for tracking long-term continuity details like family finances. The writers focus on the immediate episode story without worrying about whether it contradicts previous episodes' economic implications. Real small-town Colorado families with similar employment situations to the Marshes would struggle significantly. Job instability creates enormous stress. Frequent job changes make it hard to build benefits, retirement savings, or career advancement. A receptionist's salary alone couldn't support a family of 4 comfortably in most Colorado towns, especially not in desirable mountain communities where cost of living is elevated. But this realism would make South Park a different show. If Stan's family faced real financial struggles due to Randy's employment chaos, the tone would shift. The show would become about economic anxiety and family stress. While South Park tackles serious issues sometimes, maintaining constant financial struggle as a background element would limit the types of stories they could tell. The marshes need to be stable enough to participate in whatever absurd plot each episode requires. There's also the fact that Stan is a kid, and the show is partially from his perspective. Kids often don't understand their family's financial situation. Stan might not know if his family struggles with money. He sees the surface. They have a house, food, the things he needs, and doesn't think about how it's paid for. The show's lack of focus on Marsh family finances might reflect Stan's childish unawareness of adult financial concerns. How does Stan's family afford everything? The honest answer is that South Park doesn't care, and that's intentional. Randy cycles through jobs because his employment chaos creates comedy, not because the show wants to explore unemployment's financial impact. Sharon's modest income goes unquestioned because questioning it would require the show to explain economics that aren't relevant to its satire and humor. The Tegrity Farm's marijuana business might have made the Marshes wealthy recently, but that doesn't explain the previous 20-plus seasons. Before marijuana farming, the family survived on cartoon economics where income and expenses don't need to balance realistically. They had money when they needed money. They struggled when struggling was funny. The finances existed in whatever state each episode required. This might frustrate viewers who want consistency, but it's fundamental to how South Park operates. The show has never prioritized realistic world building or continuity. Characters and situations are tools for satire and comedy, not elements of a carefully constructed fictional universe. Randy can be a geologist, a mall cop, and a marijuana farmer because each job serves different stories. The economic implications don't matter because economics isn't what the show is about. Maybe the real mystery is why audiences expect economic realism from a show about talking turds and celebrities living in town. South Park has never pretended to be realistic. Its appeal is its willingness to ignore realism for comedy. The Marsh family affords their lifestyle the same way Kenny dies and resurrects, the same way Mr. Garrison changes gender, the same way anything happens in South Park. It's funny, so it happens. The logistics are irrelevant. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the crab people existence theory. The crab people are one of South Park's strangest recurring elements. Ancient crab-like humanoids who live underground and manipulate surface society. They appeared in South Park is Gay in 2003, then showed up sporadically in later episodes. Are the crab people actually real within South Park's universe? Are they a one-time gag that became a running joke? Or is there an actual conspiracy of underground crab creatures controlling events? The show has never clearly answered this question. The crab people first appeared in the episode South Park is Gay, which aired on the 22nd of October, 2003, during season 7. This episode satirized the metrosexual trend that was popular in the early 2000s. Suddenly, straight men were adopting grooming habits and fashion choices traditionally associated with gay culture. The trend was heavily promoted in media and marketing. South Park took this cultural phenomenon and created a conspiracy theory to explain it. In South Park is Gay, all the men and boys in town suddenly become metrosexual. They start caring about fashion, skincare, and appearance. They watch makeover shows. They go shopping together. Kyle's dad Gerald becomes obsessed with designer clothes. Randy starts getting manicures. Even the boys adopt metrosexual styling. The entire male population of South Park transforms seemingly overnight. This rapid cultural shift raises questions. Why is everyone changing simultaneously? Where is this influence coming from? The Queer Eye for the Straight Guy television show is referenced as a major influence, but that doesn't explain the synchronized transformation. Something else is driving this change. The boys investigate and discover the truth. Underground beneath South Park, there's a civilization of crab people. These are humanoid creatures with crab-like features, claws, shells, antennae, and the ability to walk upright. The crab people live in tunnels and caverns below the surface world. They've been down there for a long time, possibly centuries or millennia. They've been watching humanity from below and planning their rise to power. The crab people have a strategy for world domination. They can't simply attack the surface world with force. They're not strong enough or numerous enough for direct conquest. Instead, they've developed a more subtle plan: make men effeminate and weak. Once the men are no longer masculine and aggressive, the crab people can emerge and take control of society without resistance. It's psychological warfare rather than military action. To accomplish this, the crab people have infiltrated surface society. They've gotten into the fashion industry, entertainment, and media. They're the ones promoting metrosexuality. The cultural trend isn't organic. It's manufactured by underground crab creatures as phase one of an invasion. By making metrosexuality popular, they're literally feminizing the male population as preparation for takeover. This conspiracy is revealed when the boys discover the crab people's underground base. They see the creatures in their natural habitat. The crab people have a leader who explains the plan. They show the boys their operation, how they've infiltrated human society, how they're spreading metrosexual culture, how close they are to achieving their goal. The boys witness the conspiracy firsthand. The crab people have a distinctive chant that they repeat. Crab people, taste like crab, talk like people. This chant became one of the most memorable elements of their appearance. It's rhythmic and catchy. Fans quote it constantly. The chant suggests the crab people are some kind of hybrid. They have crab characteristics, but human-like intelligence and speech. They're not simply crabs. They're something new. The episode's climax involves exposing the crab people's plan and defeating them. Once the conspiracy is revealed, the metrosexual trend collapses. Men return to their previous masculine behavior. The crab people retreat back underground. Their plan failed. South Park returns to normal. The invasion is thwarted before it even began. This seems like a one-off joke. The crab people served their purpose for that episode's satire of metrosexual culture. They provided an absurd explanation for a real cultural trend. The conspiracy angle let South Park mock both the trend itself and conspiracy thinking about cultural changes. It was funny. It worked for that story. And that should have been the end of it. But the crab people didn't disappear. They reappeared in later episodes, though never as prominently as in South Park is Gay. In the episode 200 and its follow-up 201, which aired during season 14 in 2010, the crab people are among the villains who gather to attack South Park. They're part of a coalition of antagonists who team up. This confirms they still exist, and they're still hostile to the surface world. The 200 and 201 episodes are significant because they bring back many classic South Park villains and characters for a major crossover event. The crab people appearing in these episodes suggests they're considered important enough to be part of South Park's rogues gallery. They're not just a throwaway joke from one episode. They're part of the show's mythology, however loosely defined that mythology is. Beyond these appearances, the crab people show up in background moments and quick references. Sometimes you can spot them in crowd scenes. Occasionally a character will mention them in passing. They exist in South Park's universe as a known entity, even if they're not actively plotting anymore. The show treats them as real creatures that everyone knows about, at least to some extent. This raises a central question. Are the crab people actually real in South Park's continuity? Or are they a joke that occasionally gets referenced? The show treats them as real. Characters don't question their existence in episodes where they appear. The boys saw them personally. Other villains interact with them. By all evidence within the show's logic, the crab people genuinely exist as underground crab-human hybrids who try to take over the world through cultural manipulation. But they're also clearly absurd. Underground civilizations of crab people don't exist in reality. Their conspiracy theory doesn't make sense even within South Park's loose logic. If they can infiltrate fashion and media industries well enough to drive cultural trends, why can't they just stay infiltrated and control society that way? Why do they need to emerge at all? The plan has logical holes because it's satire, not serious world building. The question of whether other characters know about the crab people is interesting. In South Park is Gay. The boys discover them and presumably tell others. But subsequent episodes don't reference this knowledge widely. Most characters act as if they don't know about underground crab civilizations. Either the boys' report wasn't believed, or everyone forgot, or the show simply isn't maintaining continuity about who knows what. This is typical for South Park. Information revealed in one episode doesn't necessarily carry over to future episodes unless it's useful. The boys have encountered aliens, monsters, supernatural beings, and all kinds of impossible things. They've saved the world multiple times. But each episode largely resets the status quo. Knowledge and experiences from previous episodes exist in a gray area of maybe canonical, maybe forgotten. The crab people fit into South Park's broader pattern of conspiracy and paranoia. The show frequently uses conspiracy theories for comedy. Sometimes the conspiracies are real within the show's universe. Other times they're delusions. The show enjoys the ambiguity between real conspiracies and paranoid fantasy. The crab people represent this perfectly. They're a conspiracy that's real enough to appear in episodes, but absurd enough to be satirical. Compared to other South Park conspiracy elements, the crab people are relatively straightforward. They exist, they live underground, they tried to take over once. They failed. This is simpler than the complex mythology around Kenny's death or Cartman's parentage. The crab people don't have multiple contradictory origin stories. They just are what they appeared to be in their first episode. The satirical meaning of the crab people is obvious. They represent anxieties about cultural change, particularly changes in gender norms and masculinity. The early 2000s saw significant shifts in how masculinity was portrayed in media. The metrosexual trend was part of this. Conservative commentators worried about men becoming feminized by modern culture. The crab people take this anxiety and literalize it. Yes, there is a conspiracy to make men less masculine, and it's being run by underground crab creatures. This satire works on multiple levels. It mocks the actual metrosexual trend by treating it as sinister and manufactured. It mocks conservative anxiety about changing gender norms by making the conspiracy ridiculous. It mocks conspiracy thinking itself by showing how absurd explanations can sound plausible if you're already predisposed to believe in conspiracies. The crab people are a perfect vehicle for this multi-layered satire. The fact that they keep appearing in later episodes suggests Matt Stone and Trey Parker enjoyed the concept enough to bring it back. The crab people became one of those South Park elements that's weird and memorable enough to deserve occasional callbacks. Like Man Bear Pig or the Underpants Gnomes, the crab people transcended their original episode and became part of South Park's stable of recurring weird elements. But they've never gotten another major storyline. The crab people remain background elements and references rather than central characters or major threats. This suggests that the creators like them enough to keep them around but don't have another story to tell with them. They served their purpose in South Park is Gay, and now exist as part of the show's mythology without needing to do anything else. Fan theories about the crab people have emerged over the years. Some fans believe the crab people are still active behind the scenes, manipulating events we don't see. According to these theories, various cultural trends and changes in South Park could be attributed to ongoing crab people influence. They failed at their original plan, but they're still working on other schemes. These theories treat the crab people as a persistent threat, rather than a defeated one-time villain. Other fans argue the crab people are evolutionary beings adapting to surface culture. Maybe they're trying to integrate rather than conquer. Maybe their appearance in later episodes shows them coexisting with surface dwellers, rather than plotting against them. This would make them more sympathetic. They're just trying to survive and thrive in a world that doesn't have space for them. The truth is probably simpler. The crab people are a funny idea that worked for one episode, and occasionally gets referenced for nostalgia and continuity callbacks. They exist in South Park's universe because they haven't been explicitly retconned out of existence. They're real the same way many absurd things in South Park are real. They happened in an episode, therefore they're part of the show's history, but they don't require deep analysis or ongoing storylines. Are the crab people real? Within South Park's universe, yes. They're treated as actual creatures who exist and have interacted with the main characters. But they're not a major ongoing presence. They appeared, tried to take over through cultural manipulation, failed, and retreated to whatever they do underground. They show up occasionally in group villain scenes or background jokes, confirming they still exist but aren't currently a threat. The mystery isn't really about whether they exist. It's about why they don't do more. If underground crab civilizations are real, and they've already proven they can infiltrate human society successfully, why have they given up? Did one failed plan really defeat them permanently? Or are they still plotting, waiting for their next opportunity? The show doesn't answer because the show doesn't need to answer. The crab people did what they needed to do narratively, and that's sufficient. What the crab people represent thematically matters more than their literal existence. They're about fear of change, particularly cultural changes that challenge traditional values. They're about conspiracy thinking and the human tendency to see hidden hands behind social trends we don't understand. They're about how satire can make the ridiculous seem plausible by exaggerating real anxieties. This thematic weight gives the crab people staying power beyond their original episode. So the crab people exist, they're real, they live underground, they tried to take over once, and they occasionally appear in later episodes confirming they're still around. That's what we know. What we don't know is what they're doing now, whether they're still plotting, or what their society is like when they're not trying to conquer the surface world. South Park doesn't care about fleshing out crab people culture and history, because that's not what they're for. They're a satirical device that occasionally gets reused, not a fully developed civilization requiring extensive lore. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Butters, multiple personality inconsistency. Butters Stotch is South Park's most innocent character. Sweet, naive, constantly victimized by his parents and classmates. But Butters also has an alter ego, Professor Chaos, a supervillain persona that appears when Butters snaps. And in one episode, Butters has a third personality, called Dr. Janus. So what's the deal with Butters' mental state? Does he have multiple personalities? Is Professor Chaos real or pretend? The show treats this inconsistently, and the mystery of Butters' psychology remains unsolved. Butterscotch is characterized from early on as the most wholesome, innocent, and naive child in South Park. While the other boys are cynical and crude, Butters remains optimistic and trusting. He believes the best in people. He follows rules. He tries to please authority figures. He is genuinely kind and gentle. This makes him a target. His innocence gets exploited constantly by other characters, particularly Cartman. Butters' home life is terrible. His parents, Stephen and Linda Stotch, are extremely strict and abusive. They ground Butters for minor infractions, or for things that aren't his fault. The punishments are excessive and unreasonable. Butters lives in constant fear of being grounded. His parents' treatment of him borders on psychological abuse. They gaslight him, manipulate him, and punish him disproportionately. For several seasons, this is all Butters is. The innocent kid who gets victimized. He's the butt of jokes. He's the one who suffers while other characters succeed. He's sweet and likable, but he's defined primarily by how others treat him, rather than by his own agency. He's passive, reactive, never taking control of situations. Then in season 6, something changes. The episode Professor Chaos aired on the 10th of April 2002. In this episode, Cartman, Kyle, and Stan are looking for a new fourth member of their group after repeatedly kicking out various candidates. They hold tryouts. Butters makes it to the final round, but ultimately gets rejected. The boys tell Butters he's not good enough to be their friend. This rejection devastates him. Butters walks home crushed. He's been rejected by the only friends he had. He feels worthless and alone. In his pain and anger, something inside Butters breaks. He decides he's done being the victim. If society rejects him, he'll reject society. He'll become a villain. He'll make the world pay for how it's treated him. This is when Professor Chaos is born. Professor Chaos is Butters' supervillain alter ego. He creates a costume, a cape, a helmet, tinfoil accessories. He adopts a villain persona, complete with dramatic voice and mannerisms. Professor Chaos is everything Butters isn't. Where Butters is sweet, Professor Chaos is mean. Where Butters is obedient, Professor Chaos is rebellious. Where Butters is passive, Professor Chaos is active and aggressive. Professor Chaos recruits a sidekick, Dougie, who becomes General Disarray. Together they plot to cause chaos in South Park. Their schemes are hilariously minor. Things like loosening the tops on salt shakers at restaurants or flooding a parking lot. They're attempting supervillainy, but their execution is childish and ineffective. Professor Chaos wants to be threatening, but ends up being adorable. The show plays Professor Chaos as clearly pretend. Butters is a child playing dress-up and acting out his anger through fantasy. He's not actually developing a separate personality. He's creating a persona that lets him express feelings he can't express as Butters. When he's Professor Chaos, he gets to be confident and powerful instead of scared and weak. It's psychological coping through roleplay, not genuine dissociative identity disorder. Professor Chaos appears in multiple episodes after his introduction. Sometimes Butters puts on the costume and plays villain when he's feeling frustrated or powerless. Other times the show references Professor Chaos as something Butters used to do. The alter ego comes and goes depending on Butters' emotional state and the episode's needs. It's treated as a phase or a hobby rather than a serious mental health condition. But then there's Dr. Janus. In the episode Jared Has AIDS, which aired during season 6, Butters exhibits a genuinely different personality. This isn't play acting. This is presented as Butters actually having a split personality. Dr. Janus is Butters' evil side, a darker, meaner version of himself that emerges involuntarily. Dr. Janus doesn't wear a costume. He doesn't need props or persona building. He just appears. Butters' demeanor and voice change. He becomes cruel and manipulative. Dr. Janus is genuinely dangerous in ways Professor Chaos never is. Where Professor Chaos is harmless fantasy villainy, Dr. Janus seems like a real psychological disorder manifesting. The Dr. Janus personality appears once in that episode and then never again. He's not referenced in later episodes. He doesn't come back during moments when Butters is stressed or angry. He just vanishes from continuity as if he never existed. This is bizarre because if Butters genuinely has dissociative identity disorder with an evil alternate personality, that would be a major character trait worth exploring. But the show drops it immediately. This creates a central inconsistency. Does Butters have multiple personalities or not? Professor Chaos is clearly pretend, a costume and an act that Butters controls. Dr. Janus seemed like a genuine disorder, an involuntary alternate personality that emerged without Butters' conscious control. But Professor Chaos appears in many episodes, while Dr. Janus appears once and disappears. Which one represents Butters' actual psychological state? The show never addresses this contradiction. Butters continues to occasionally become Professor Chaos in later seasons, always in the pretend role-playing way. Dr. Janus is never mentioned or seen again. It's as if the writers tried a genuine split personality angle for one episode, decided it didn't work, and abandoned it in favor of the more lighthearted Professor Chaos persona. From a mental health perspective, this inconsistency is significant. Dissociative identity disorder is a serious condition, typically resulting from severe childhood trauma. Given Butters' abusive home life and constant victimization, he would be a plausible candidate for developing DID or other trauma-related psychological issues. If the show wanted to explore this realistically, it could. But South Park doesn't do realistic mental health portrayals. The show uses mental illness for comedy. Tweek's anxiety is played for laughs. Timmy and Jimmy's disabilities are sources of jokes. Cartman is clearly a sociopath, but this is never addressed seriously. The show doesn't have educational obligations about psychological representation. It uses whatever traits serve the comedy without worrying about accuracy or implications. Professor Chaos as a character concept that works better for South Park's tone than Dr. Janus does. Professor Chaos is funny. A child in a tinfoil costume trying to be a supervillain is inherently comedic. His schemes are harmless and ineffective, which makes him sympathetic rather than disturbing. The audience can laugh with and at Professor Chaos without feeling uncomfortable. Dr. Janus, by contrast, is dark. A child with genuine dissociative identity disorder stemming from abuse is tragic, not funny. An evil alternate personality that Butters can't control is scary, not comedic. This darkness doesn't fit Butters' role in the show. Butters is meant to be the sweet, innocent kid. Having him possess a genuinely evil alter ego would fundamentally change his character in ways that would limit how he could be used in stories. The writers likely realized this, and that's why Dr. Janus never returned. He was too dark, too serious, too uncomfortable for what South Park wanted to do with Butters. Professor Chaos, being obviously pretend and harmless, works better. It lets Butters express frustration and anger without actually changing who he is. When he takes off the Professor Chaos costume, he's still Butters. That's not how real DID works, but it's how South Park needs it to work. Butters has many episodes where he experiences genuine psychological breaks from reality. His parents' abuse causes visible trauma. He dissociates. He has emotional breakdowns. He shows signs of serious mental distress. In a realistic show, Butters would be in therapy or under psychiatric care. His home situation would be investigated by child services. But South Park doesn't operate realistically. Butters' suffering is played for dark comedy, not addressed as the serious issue it would be in reality. The show does occasionally acknowledge that Butters' treatment is wrong. Some episodes present his parents as villains whose abuse is critiqued. Episodes where Butters stands up for himself or escapes bad situations are framed positively. The show has some awareness that Butters is mistreated, but this awareness doesn't lead to lasting consequences or realistic interventions. By the next episode, everything resets. Professor Chaos has become nostalgic in recent seasons. When he appears now, it's usually as a callback to earlier seasons. The show references Professor Chaos as something from Butters' past that fans remember fondly. The character has lost any edge he might have had initially. He's now just a costume Butters puts on occasionally for fun, or when the episode needs him to. This evolution mirrors how South Park has softened some of its darker elements over time. Early seasons were more willing to be genuinely disturbing. Later seasons, while still crude and offensive, have become slightly more lighthearted in certain ways. Professor Chaos becoming a cute callback rather than an expression of Butters' genuine psychological damage fits this pattern. What's really going on with Butters' personalities? Professor Chaos is clearly pretend. It's a costume and persona that Butters uses to cope with rejection and powerlessness. It's not a separate personality, it's a role-playing. Dr. Janus appeared once as what seemed like a genuine split personality, but was never referenced again, suggesting the writers abandoned that direction. The real mystery is why the show dropped the Dr. Janus angle. Was it too dark? Did it not get good audience reception? Did the writers simply forget about it? Or did they deliberately choose to keep Butters as the innocent victim character rather than giving him a genuinely dangerous side? We can speculate, but the show never explains why Dr. Janus disappeared from continuity. Butters' psychology is inconsistent because South Park doesn't maintain character consistency when it would limit storytelling options. Butters is innocent when innocence serves the story. He's Professor Chaos when the episode needs him to express frustration comically. He had Dr. Janus once when that episode needed a darker turn. These different versions of Butters coexist without reconciliation because the show doesn't require reconciliation. This is frustrating for viewers who want consistent characterization, but it's fundamental to how South Park operates. Characters are tools for satire and comedy first, consistent psychological entities second. Butters can be sweet and traumatized, and role-playing as a villain, and occasionally genuinely disturbed, all without the show needing to explain how these traits fit together. They fit together because they're all useful for different stories. The most honest answer is that Butters doesn't have multiple personalities in any clinical sense. He has a costume he wears sometimes, and an abandoned plot thread from one episode. His psychology is whatever each episode needs it to be. He's the show's innocent character who occasionally cosplays as a villain, with one weird exception that nobody mentions anymore. That's the reality of Butters in South Park's flexible continuity. The mysteries of South Park represent something bigger than just a crude animated comedy. They represent a show that prioritizes humor over consistency, satire over logic, and shock over explanation. For over 25 years, these mysteries have kept fans analyzing, debating, and theorizing. Some mysteries have official answers that don't make sense. Some have no answers at all, and some are answered differently depending on which episode you watch. The beauty of South Park's mysteries is that they don't need to be solved. The show changes its own rules constantly, because rigid continuity would limit the comedy. Kenny dies and comes back because it's funny. Cartman's father changes because the new answer is darker. The crab people exist because they're absurd. South Park's mysteries remind us that sometimes chaos is more entertaining than clarity. Sometimes the joke matters more than the explanation. And sometimes the real mystery is why we expect a show that started with construction paper cutouts to have consistent lore.